So my name is Daryl, Jett, and when I worked at the Providence Black Repertory Company, I was the facilities manager, and my responsibilities were to maintain the building, the computer systems, security, and any other things that were building related that was needed. That's pretty much what I did. I was involved with the Black Rep for approximately 15 years, from start to finish. And I left the Black Rep to work for the city of Providence. I'm from Providence, born and raised. My mother-in-law, who was Beverly Hall, she's now deceased, unfortunately, but she was going to be the office manager for the Black Rep. And she was going down to meet with Donald W. King, and I went with her to the office because I didn't want her to go by herself. I was unaware of the Black Rep, what it was about, what they did. So I was curious to see where she was going, who she was going to be meeting. And she met Don, and it was a fourth floor, call it a studio. It was several different rooms on the fourth floor. But at the time that I went there, the fourth floor was really just one small office, and the larger rooms were used for storage space, and there was a performance space that was empty, aside from sounding equipment and some lighting, stuff like that. So once my mother-in-law took the job and my wife would volunteer working in the office as well, I had been laid off. So I had time on my hands, so I volunteered to be the public relations person for the Black Rep. To be perfectly honest, Don King, who has a way about making people feel comfortable, wanting to be involved. He was the central and focal point that everybody was drawn to. And his ideas for bringing about theater for black folks. I didn't go to the theater prior to Black Rep. I thought about it, wanted to go, but I really didn't. You know, it kind of felt like it wasn't for me, it was for somebody else. So when I met Don King and he started talking about theater, and to see how it all came about, watching the actors run their lines. Two of my daughters were in plays, at Black Rep, and I started out as a sound person, actually working on a play, several actually. So it gave me an insight that it was like a world that I'd never heard of. We knew about PPAC or, Trinity and stuff like that, but you almost felt like you didn't dare go there, even though, it was open to everybody, but a lot of the plays that were being performed didn't really relate to me. So when I met Don and he started talking about different plays that he wanted to do, a play about Nelson Mandela, I could relate to that. So that's what made the Black Rep. It was a sense of, you almost felt like you were home, when you were there. We used to spend a lot of time not even doing stuff, just being there and feeling comfortable in the space because you felt like you were home. Well, that would be hard because I hadn't heard of it before. The Black Rep was the kind of place that once you got there, you didn't leave. You know what I mean? I mean, you left at the end of the day, but I mean, you always wanted to be there. So I couldn't tell you what it was like prior to because I hadn't heard of it. But once I talked to Don and saw what it was that he was trying to do, nobody wanted to leave. Even though times were tough, like economically, we weren't making a lot of money, people just showed up anyway, and did whatever needed to be done. So you didn't leave. If Black Rep was here today, we'd be right there. That's just the way it was. So early on, when I started out, I created a title for myself as public relations because I didn't know what to say that I was doing. And basically in the beginning, it was just securing things that we needed through through donations. And then once the office and everything was running and everything was established, I used to fix computers. And it was self-taught. And so every time something would break, I would take it upon myself to fix it or get it fixed. You know, we had an elevator that used to act up all the time, and we had power outages and stuff because back then the Black Rep had circuit breakers on our side of the apartment or studio, and on the other half of the studio there were breakers that we didn't have access to because it was in somebody else's apartment, but they actually controlled equipment on our side of the building, and I don't know why that was, but so we needed someone to run point between the Black Rep, the landlord, and all those kinds of things. So that's what I took on. And so it just kind of developed over time where wherever there was a need, I would fill the need. And then we started renting out the performance space to Johnson and Wales, Brown students. We had a Brown reunion held in the space, and so we would raise money through donations from those people, and then that's how we stayed afloat. So I would rent out the space, we get the money from that, and we'd pay rent and pay whatever we had to do. But and we also had Round Midnight, which was a hip-hop competition that teenagers would come and they would compete, you know, once a week. And so we needed someone for security for that. So I did that. So it was always a matter of whatever was needed and you could do it, then that's what you did. You might have had a title of one thing, but you kind of helped out all over. It was that kind of environment where no one really said, this isn't my job. You know, it'd be like, we need someone to go shopping. You know, we have a play coming up and we need this and we need that. And if you had the car or you had the ability to go do it, that's what you did. When we had a movie shot at Black Rep one time, Don Mays was doing it, and he needed someone to go and pick up some of his actors for his movie. And so I was there, I went and picked him up. Now, that wasn't my function at the time, but because it needed doing, you just kind of fell in. The first thing that was the most impressive thing for me was when we did a play at Trinity. And because we didn't have the seating capacity to do it in our own space. And we filled up Trinity. And all of the members of Black Rep were all in the aisles with black t-shirts on with an elephant, a white elephant on the front, which was the logo. And then the second part, which topped that, was moving into our own space on Washington Street. And I'll never forget when Don gave me my set of keys, and I said, "What is this for?" And he said, "For the building." And you know, we went over to the building, and back then it was just the building. You know, it needed a lot of work, and we went through a lot of different changes. The previous owner took out some pieces of hardware for the doors and different things, and because he was upset because he didn't want to vacate the premises. It used to be a gym before we got it. But just walking in and just thinking of the possibilities of us having our own space, we wouldn't have to worry about someone telling us what we could or couldn't do. It was amazing. Sound session was truly amazing. I mean, the entertainers that we met, we had Ray Charles, I mean, not Ray Charles, I'm sorry. We had B.B. King come to the Black Rep and donate one of his guitars so that we could auction it off as a fundraiser. And when he came to the Black Rep, and I had met, my father loved B.B. King, but I never met him. I saw him at a Newport Jazz Festival years before. But I didn't get. I talked to him briefly, and he gave me a guitar pick. I was a park ranger back then for the Newport Jazz Festival. But when he came to the Black Rep, I actually walked with him from his tour bus into the Black Rep and was responsible for his security getting in and out. Well, let's put it this way. Aside from Rights and Reasons, which is run by Brown, which is part of their theater program, there really wasn't much black theater. There were black artists around, but there wasn't a lot of work for them, you know. So when the Black Rep came about, and it wasn't just theater. The Black Rep had after-school programs. You know, we would have events. We had one of the largest concerts in Providence for free that we provided, you know, that we did in conjunction with the city. They had never had anything that big in the city before us. I mean, they talked about it. They had events, but not events that were focused on people of color. We were the first ones to do that. So in terms of the impact that Black Rep had on the local community, it was unbelievable. You had kids that would come there, after school programs, they would get help, tutoring, all that kind of stuff was going on. So it wasn't just theater. And then you had the performance arts programs that we did. We had different artists come in and teach drumming and video editing classes. I mean, we did a bunch of things. And then we had community outreach programs that we did, like Brown would fund, but we would have like panel discussions on issues that were happening at the time, like immigration, which is a huge problem today, but it was equally as, maybe not as bad as it is with the current administration, but we had a lot of immigration issues in Rhode Island that people weren't talking about, that we brought people together. There were like 7 different ethnicities in this group, and we would all talk about all the misconceptions that we have about each other. Like, we all think that everyone who is Latino or Hispanic all get along and stick together, when we found out that there are pockets of individual groups that are not as united as you would think. And some people think all black people stick together, when in reality, we're as divided equally as any other group. So all of those viewpoints were discussed and talked about in an environment where people felt safe and comfortable to do it. That was Black Rep. So you had it was like your civic duty to do these things, and you had a community portion of it where you did events and everything. So the impact was huge, because if you look around now, nothing took Black Rep's place. Like, there's nothing here that does what Black Rep did. So there's a void. So if you were to talk to anybody who's in the age range between 15 and 30, back then, they were involved in Black Rep in some way or another. And now it's gone. So it was huge, huge impact. Oh, no. No. He's a hell of a friend. A hell of a friend. He was a person that, this is what my wife said. Don King was the kind of guy that made you feel like you were the only person in the world when he was talking to you. He truly was interested in what you had to say, how you felt, or how you thought about something. That was one of his talents, that he made people feel special when he talked. That's what I would say. He made people feel special. It's more than, like, they say people have charisma or stuff like that, but I don't know. He had an infectious personality about him that made people want to be involved with what he was involved in. It didn't matter what it was. You know, he could see things that you couldn't see. I mean, he could see it clearly, and he could articulate it. That was the other part. You know, some people have ideas, but they can't really tell you what it is that they want to do. Not Don. Don could see things like it was standing right there in front of him. I think the one thing that hurts every organization that doesn't make it is funding. I think that if the arts were taken as seriously as they are, or the impact that arts has on individual lives, I think the arts would be held in higher esteem than what they are. Because you're always fighting, all the different groups that are in Providence all fight for the same funding. You know, there's one pool, but there's not enough to sustain everybody. There's enough to get you started, but then you're always chasing the dollar, and I think chasing after money tends to change your perspective on what it is you're trying to do, because you're always chasing money, and you're always hiring fund development people, you know, and some are good, some are not as good, but I think funding was the one thing that hurt the Black Rep the most, because we were working there for little to no money, and then when the money got tighter and tighter and tighter, then you were forced to do something else to make ends meet. So I think funding was the principal thing that made the Black Rep decline. You know, we were trying to run a bar, and some days it was good, some days it was bad. And the other part is, I was a tech person. I always wanted to have everything on camera, you know, because, you know, even though you want to trust people, sometimes you can't. Sometimes you think you can trust somebody, and you find out much later that you can't. So there were some people that did some things that they shouldn't have. But by the time you find out, and early on, we had a guy, we were all working for like $10 a week, something, it was, or maybe $25 a week. It was really, really low. And everyone agreed that they would work. And we had this young guy who had a girlfriend that worked in a bank. So we were given a stipend every week when we were working around midnight, which was Friday nights. And we had he wasn't an employee, but he was a rap artist or MC, and he was good. And so, you know, things were going smoothly. We were doing our thing every week. And then all of a sudden, one of our board members, who was the treasurer, called up and said, you know, I need to speak to you. There's some discrepancies in one of the bank accounts. So I'm like, what are you talking about? So this money started missing. So she's telling me that the only people that have access to the bank accounts would be Don, and at that time I don't even think I had access, and one other person. So of course we're all looking at each other saying, well, I didn't take any money, and you're saying you didn't take any money, and she didn't take any money, so where'd the money go? So it wasn't until Don went or they sent Don the canceled checks from the checks that had been written previously, and this person had actually whited out a check. You could see the whiteout on the check, and he changed it, but because his girlfriend worked at the bank, she cashed the check, even though she knew it was wrong. And so, you know, there were setbacks financially because of that. We ended up getting the money back, but I mean, you know, there were people that did things at crucial times that also helped to set back the Black Rep, because it put an air of untrust where there really didn't need to be. And then we found out who it was when we got to the bottom of it. But, that was one of the types of things that, that was early on. So it didn't lead to the demise, but there was always something happening where you couldn't watch. As we got bigger, you couldn't watch everybody. When we had a handful of staff, it was easy to know there were checks and balances to see who was doing what. And of course, Don was off, doing what he was trying to do as the executive director, so it was left for people to pretty much police themselves. And some people are not able to do that. So that was another issue. When we were doing sound session, things just went missing, put it that way, at a time when we needed it not to go missing. So that was one of the other things that hurt the black rep. And I think some people weren't as vested in the black rep as the people that founded it. We would have worked there for nothing if we thought it would have made things, we would have kept the black rep together. But as I moved on and I took a job with the city, and then I turned over my responsibilities to someone else, I think that probably hurt us too. Someone once told me that they were very confident and comfortable when they used to see me and Don together, because they knew that when we were there, and no matter what was going on, we'd be able to take care of it. So I think, when I took the job with the city, which was beneficial for myself financially, because I got a huge boost in pay compared to what I was making. So I did it because I needed to do it, for me and my family. But people moved on as well, and I think those were some of the deciding factors that, not led to it, but they contributed to seeing how things changed, down the line.